At a time of global trade wars, the International Monetary Fund or IMF has praised India for using the right policies to lower its level of debt. Highlighting India's debt to GDP ratio and its gross domestic product or GDP, IMF said India's share is quite high, but the country is trying to lower it using the right policies. At the same time, the International Monetary Fund or the IMF cautioned other major economies, especially China, saying public debt in advanced and emerging market economies are currently at historic highs. The IMF advised major economies like China to avoid policies that increase economic fluctuations. Debt to GDP ratio is the ratio between countries' government debt and its gross domestic product or the GDP. The IMF also noted that most of the debt is in advanced economies, although in the last 10 years, emerging market economies like China have been responsible for most of the increase. India plans to continue with fiscal consolidation in the current fiscal year, and according to IMF, this is one of the right policies India has adopted. India has targeted the fiscal deficit of 3% over the medium term. Moreover, the debt to GDP ratio of US is in question every now and then. At the end of December last year, among major economies, Japan had the highest debt to GDP ratio at 253%, followed by Italy at 132% and the US at 105%, while India's debt to GDP ratio is around 70%. The US debt to GDP ratio is projected to widen to 116.9% by 2023. China's debt to GDP ratio at the end of last year was 47.6%. Joining me on this story is WION's business correspondent Sumit Chaturvedi. He joins me live from WION's newsroom. Good afternoon, Sumit. What do you make of these remarks by the IMF?
Whenever we compare two economies in Asia, I would clearly compare India and China. And here, China has been reprimanded by IMF because of its high GDP to debt ratio. The reason being here is that China's growth engine is sputtering at an all-time high. But the problem here is the basis at the kind of debt they have taken is clearly not sustainable. If we look at the income, China's income, if we compare it to US, is 1/4 by purchasing power parity. This shows what kind of bubble China is sitting on, or what kind of bubble Chinese economy is. So in a way, it has praised India because India has adopted the right policies like bringing the fiscal deficit under control, which is at 3% of the annual target. So these all praises mean that India's fiscal policies are on the right track, whereas China is borrowing a lot to keep the momentum going, which is a risk going forward. In the long term, it could be a big risk because whenever the theories come that China's bubble is going to burst, this is the reason why the bubble could burst, because at such high level, the debt